Eventually you have to make a decision no matter what's going on in your life, that you're still alive. So you might as well start living. I grew up living with my mother and my 3 other siblings on her side. We lived in an apartment complex called Center Court on a side of town where there was a prevalence of drugs, promiscuity, and gang violence. I have some memories of watching my mother go out the back door on the back porch to smoke, and I would hide behind the kitchen wall so I could see her, but she couldn't see me. And that was my way of protecting her at maybe 4 or 5 years old, just being prepared in case something happened to her. I wanted to be ready and, aware of what was going on with her. I wanted to protect her in my own way at that time. I frequented my maternal grandparents' house quite often, to the point where I was there so much I might as well had lived there with my grandparents. And my grandmother would tell me, why don't you go and spend some time with your mother today? And it was shortly after a traumatic visit with my mother. My mother turned myself and my younger sister over into our father's custody. From the perspective of a 4 or 5-year-old girl, I didn't know my father. He wasn't around, to no fault of his own at that point. But it was like moving in with a stranger, essentially. We did not have a relationship with our father at that point. So I lived with my father for 8 years after that, and still would frequent my grandparents' house on weekends and breaks from school and any other occasion where I saw the opportunity to visit their house. In those 8 years, initially we didn't even have toothbrushes, and at times we went without basic necessities. There were times my clothes were so tight that they left marks on my skin. What I didn't realize, because I had learned to trust my father and developed a close relationship with him, was that he had an alcohol addiction. When I was 13 years old, it had gotten the better of him and he started disappearing. Now, sometimes it was days that he'd be gone at a time, other times it was weeks, and I believe the longest period of time was 1 month, during which myself and my 2 younger siblings were still going to school but having to fend for ourselves at home. One day he came back and I told him, I do not want to live here anymore. I don't want to live under these conditions. He then proceeded to call me selfish and use other manipulative tools to try to persuade me to stay. At this point, I knew I could no longer hold this and, keep it a secret. So I called my maternal grandmother. I told her what was going on and I asked her to get involved. I believe it was that next day or really quickly after, I packed a bag, she came to my house, and I just left. During which time my father had disappeared again. This marked the beginning of a series of tumultuous court proceedings. During this time, my mother resurfaced as a potential guardian figure. She saw it as an opportunity to receive more government funding if she got custody of myself and my younger sister. And a little over 1 month after my 14th birthday, my maternal grandmother was awarded custody of me. 3 years later, I was looking for a sense of direction in life. So I started to pursue the God that my grandparents taught me about when I was growing up. And he started healing me to the point of wholeness from the inside out. I finally stopped seeing myself through the lens of my past circumstances. And instead, I put on the identity of a daughter of the King of Kings. God inspired me to start sharing my story on social media platforms, which then grew into 2 hands-on youth ministries that I started outside of my home church. Since then, I have fallen in love with the calling of God on my life. I now have the power to teach young children to cast off the burdens that I carried at that age. There's nothing in my life up until this point that has been more fulfilling. This is my story, the beginning.